Yeah,
No,
I'll
that's
turn this back up when you want to play something.
okay. All right, that's a good deal. Oh, now I can hear myself. All right, so thank you guys for coming. Yeah, we're going to talk about megafloods. This is an idea that's been around for since 4,000 or 5,000 BC. It's in the Bible. Noah wrote about it. 600-year-old man Noah, two by land, two. No, that's Paul Revere. Sorry, but we're also going to talk about this. You guys all know this word, G-flock. Okay, you're going to know about it at the end of the day. This is a glacial lake outburst flood. Okay, it's the newest an acronym that geologists use all over the world. And G-flock are these glacial lakes when and there's more of them now because of global warming. So you're going to have these issues wherever you go. The other thing that's a big issue is, let's see what happened here. See if I can do this here. The other thing that's going on is, I'm all locked up here. Okay, the other thing that is also a phenomenon that we're going to deal a lot more is basically a seiche, or when a large landslide or some object gets into a lake, and then when it splashes, just like in your bathtub, you end up spilling out water out of the bathtub. So those are becoming a lot more known now that we know that they exist. This is just a little video that shows basically what a G-flock is.
Can now confirm
and
that the
this is
deluge was triggered
we're going
or
to talk about
exacerbated by a GLOF or a glacial lake outburst flood event. This comes after decades of warnings from government agencies and research studies that such events could cause significant damage to life and property in this area, especially in Sikkim and especially this particular lake. GLOF events occur when lakes are formed by melting glaciers and they suddenly burst open. And such GLOF events have been a threat to Himalayan regions for a very long time. This has been worsened in recent years because of global heating, which causes glaciers to retreat, increasingly melting ice. What happened in Sikkim is a multifaceted disaster brought about by rains and the release of extreme quantities of water from the South Lona Glacier Lake, coupled with the release of water from the Chungtang Dam. The current...
All right, so the takeaway on, let me go back there. The takeaway on G-flock is I'm going to talk about 8 of these mega floods here tonight, and there's only going to be 2 floods, the Mediterranean and on Mars. That's I'm going to give the punchline away, but there's 2 places where we didn't have these glacial lake outburst floods, but everything else is going to be one of these things. So that's the I'm getting to the conclusion at the beginning here. But the thing is, there's absolutely no nobody's figured out a way to prevent a community from getting wiped out from one of these things. So these are everybody's concerned about them throughout the world. If you go up to Juneau, Alaska, and the community right down the road from the Mendenhall Glacier, they've had 2 in the last 2 years. One was on August 6th last year, and the one this year was on August 7th. And nobody was killed, but these glacial lake outburst floods really hit this community pretty hard. And so it's basically something we're going to talk about, and that's the source of the mega floods. We're also going to talk about this guy. Who knows who this guy is? Good job, man. Good job. Now, what's he going to have to do with this stuff? Stay tuned. All right. Yeah. So, yeah, all around the world, there's about 140 of these things that are all written out in native lore throughout the world. And they basically permeate just about everybody's culture in terms of writing. And you guys know about Noah's flood. The dates that basically people were thinking is basically right in that area here. This is basically about 5,600 years ago. And then throughout the Bible, you see where people have been looking for the Noah's Ark ever since. They think they found it. We'll get to that in a minute. But down at Bishop Usher, he was an Irish bishop, and they moved to England, and he's the one who did all the begats and figured out the world's 4004 BC. And he came up with some pretty exact dates as to when Noah's flood. Encyclopedia Britannica said in 1771 that basically it's a real phenomena. We're not sure how they based that, but they said, okay, it's real. And then Charles Lyell came along, and this is really what he established the science of geology in 1830. But the key things are, should we turn down the lights a little? Or are we okay? Yeah, we can turn the lights on. Is that okay? Yeah, the idea that the key is the present is the key to the past, and the idea that these geologists, when Brett's got in front of them, thank you, the idea was that we hadn't seen the kind of water that Brett's was suggesting that carved the scablands. And because we never saw it, Charles Lyell posited that if we don't see that process out here now, we can't use that as a mechanism. So that was the thinking. Okay, so and then let's see. I said, oh yeah, the question to you guys: big floods are one process we haven't seen. So what's the other process that we haven't really experienced, but we know we should be prepare for it? And the answer is supervolcanoes. You know, we see a lot of evidence for supervolcanoes, but we have not experienced one as a human race. So that's I'll give you the answer. But these are the folks, the Native Americans that lived up here in the Olympic Peninsula. They've got a lot of history of dealing with these floods, and the big tsunami that happened in 1700. It's not a flood, but you know they do have these big tsunamis that hit the coast there. The word geology actually comes from work that they were doing. There was a whole science behind. They called it the flood theory of evolution, and so there was a lot of talk on that. So that was a sideline that basically messed up the science of geology for a long time, and everybody said, well, we don't want to use the Bible as a scientific body of evidence. And so these guys came along here, and you guys know most of these folks if you're part of the Ice Age Flood Institute. We've got Pardee and Bratz, Richard Waite and Vic Baker, who's on the stage here in August. But we're going to talk about these folks in the next few months. Most of you guys know about the Missoula floods, you know, the ice dam there at Spokane. Anybody not know about the story? You guys are good. And so this is another shot of the water coming down, and you know the whole thing that Bretz didn't accept the source of water because he had the end of his glaciation was down by Spokane, and then Pardee had the water up by Sand Point. So these are the two characters here that really got into it. And as you know, the Ice Age Flood Institute and these brochures that we're all part of, all this is, these are all deposits that are up in the Pardee's territory. So these are all flood deposits from Glacial Lake Missoula. And you know about this one, the actual brochure that the National Park Service puts out. And these are things that you can see all along here. So this should be a review for most of you folks. But it's pretty fascinating. And then I gave a talk here last year about this time about, you know, as I say, anybody that drives around Portland, all you need is an altimeter, and you can do your own Ice Age flood tour. Everywhere you look, there's evidence all around. So we'll focus initially on Pardee, and he in 1910, you know, did come up with his idea, and he was tipped off by T.C. Chamberlain in 1885 when he swung through there. He noticed the parallel lines on Mount Jumbo and all that. So he was basically saw that, and then Pardee then spent a fair amount of time, and then when he was hired at the USGS, that's his one and only paper pertaining to geology that he wrote was in in 1910 about glacial Lake Missoula. And he pretty much got it right. He did that all on horseback and Model T stuff. But the whole idea that he came up with the fact that it drained in 2 days and all that. But that was work that he did it was the unusual occurrence paper that he wrote in 1942 after he quit the USGS. So that's another story, but you guys heard most of that. This is glacial Lake Missoula. This is just hypothetical what it might look like. And these are pictures that you folks have all seen, the ripple marks when they had the rapid evacuation of the lake, which was 2,500 feet deep when it roared out of there through Eddie Narrows at 60, 70 miles an hour. It left all these ripples high and dry through there. And, Brett's didn't see these, Brett's wandered all around there and he never saw these for reasons nobody can quite figure out. But this is kind of what the dam would look like. And Richard Waite says, it basically either it was buoyant or somehow water got through there and forced the crack open. And this is basically, if you're riding this glacier down, it's smacked into that ridge. That's called Green Monarch Ridge. And this is Lake Pend Oreille, which is full of gravel, and it's quite a bit below sea level there. But the guy that really got this going, again, is Review Thomas Large. He's the one who found these deposits over by Pantops, which is just in the south part of Spokane, right in the middle of the valley there. And he saw these and he couldn't quite figure it out. So he sent a letter to to Brett's at University of Chicago, and he also sent one to the USGS. And at that time, Part E was sent out by Alden in June of 1922. And so he was out there and looking around, and he kind of came up, he says, well, and he did kind of a cursory study of this. He didn't do a real in-depth one. He kind of even said that this is kind of out of his bailiwick, and I think he was told to say that, but that's all conjecture. Brett's came along in and later that year, and then he spent the next 3 years really looking at these deposits. And so this is when Brett's took off, and you guys know this story about, in 1910 he saw this map and he said, well, this is definitely worth looking at. This is one of the first USGS maps they made in that area, and he got a hold of that. And then, the rest of that story in terms of the scablands, I'll just skip through that. But he was the one who really, as you know, determined that there was a lot of water that did this. And then the whole idea that it was able to move all these rocks around. And the idea that he didn't really come up with this, but Vic Baker was the one who said, depending on the geology, the type of rocks that you have where these big outbursts flood, that you get a certain pattern built up, and the idea that these columns can all unravel pretty dramatically in one event. That was basically what Baker has said. Basically you can lift those columns right up and out of there. And you guys have seen a lot of these pictures. I'll just go through these real quick. Anyway, West Bar is one that Brett's actually got over there, but he for reasons that again nobody really knows, he didn't make note of these ripple marks, but they're all around, as you can see. Some of these are up by Omak, which is where Jerome Lessman is doing some work, trying to decide if water came directly from the Okanagan down through here too. But this is like Ritzville. Ritzville is very dry, but this is a LiDAR shot of the Ritzville area. But you can see it's definitely been influenced by lots of running water over the years. And the same area down there, again, this is all fairly dry country, but it certainly looks like water carved all this. And again, this kind of phenomena where, all the lush has been stripped out except in certain spots. Brett's described all this in all his papers. Again, as you know, in 1927, he got pillared by the geologic community and told him, basically, because Brett's didn't really have the water. And then it was 1952 when James Gahuli, who was one of his antagonists, finally came out here and took one look at the scablands and said, well, I was so wrong. But, you know, he didn't get vindicated until later, and we'll get into that story here. But the channeled scablands were definitely, you know, it's everywhere around here as well. And the gorge certainly wasn't carved by the Ice Age floods, but it certainly was cleaned out by them. And it was, you know, basically at that depth of water. This is down by Vista House, and you could see where it was about, you know, as Jim O'Connor says, basically the water basically was held back at Rowena Gap. It wasn't the Wallua Gap that held the water back. It was the water couldn't get through Rowena Gap that caused it to back up all the way up into Pasco and north of Pasco by Cornell and Othello in that area. And you know that there's more than a bunch of floods, and that was Richard Waite figured that out. Vic Baker was on one side of that discussion, and Richard Waite was on the other. Baker thought that all these flood deposits down here were kind of the end throes of the one flood that Brett's talked about. But then Richard got out there and he found a layer of Mount St. Helens ash through there. And so if the ash was there, then you had to have more time. And that's when the idea that each one of these was a flood event, that's when that took hold. So I'll go to the next flood, which I've given this talk to this group before, but the Lake Bonneville MegaFlood, which happened about the same time. It happened, the Missoula floods were roughly between 40 of them between 15,000 years ago and 18,000 years ago, and Lake Bonneville flood happened about 17,000 years ago, and it was basically, you know, the lake over there by Lake where Great Salt Lake is, but most of Utah was underwater, and the weight of the water, again, it was about a half-mile deep, was because the crust is thin there. It was basically at the weight of the water depressed the crust in that area. It cut the benches at a level throughout the whole Great Salt Lake area, and then the water went away, and then the crust resprung. And so if you go there, and you can actually see that the lake levels are curved, and that was G.K. Gilbert came there in 1889. He saw those curved strand lines and realized that the crust was thin there. That was pretty good science on his part. Oh yeah, there I got ahead of myself. But anyway, you can see those curved. But the way what happened there was you had a lava flow that happened up here by Soda Springs, and the Bear River used to go up through Pocatello. And once that lava flow got here, it basically diverted the water through here. That water stood in this area, Glacial Lake Thatcher, for a long time, and then it finally broke through this divide there and filled up the Lake Bonneville. And this is this Red Rock Pass. The pass was basically it's not a glacial lake at all. This was all gravel that was there, and the water came up here, and then basically the gravel, and it basically was enough saturated where the water flowed through that gravel for years and years and years, quite a bit of flow, and then something happened to basically carve that out because it was already saturated. Then that's when they had the catastrophic flood at 1700 years ago, and so it poured down through Income, Idaho. That's I-15 over there, and you can see the lava flow at the top of the picture there, and then down here it stripped all that out and ran down through Pocatello and through this gap about 300 feet high, and it went down through Twin Falls and carved that all out. And so Sean Wilsey does a good talk on YouTube about the Bonneville floods in that Salt Lake or the Twin Falls area. But this is again where Evel Knievel comes in. As you can see, I was going to all tie that in, but you can see his ramp up there in the corner there. And then so he was basically calculated this arc, and I was living in Pocatello when he did that. So he tried that in September 8th, and in 1974 he tried to get across that, and basically this was his attempt. If you want to turn the sound up again, we got.
Friday, 9 years
but
after
he.
Knievel's death, and more than 40 years after the daredevil icon famously failed to jump the Snake River Canyon, a 54-year-old stuntman gave it a shot. Here's Danielle Nottingham.
Blasting off at 400 miles per hour, professional stuntman Eddie Braun soars 2,000 feet in the air, clearing an obstacle his childhood idol couldn't surmount.
My name is Evel Knievel. I'm a professional daredevil.
Whoa, it looks like a good one.
In 1974, Evel Knievel attempted to clear Snake River Canyon near Twin Falls, Idaho, but his parachute deployed too early.
There's been a mistake. The ship's going down.
Leaving him just short of the other side.
I got a canyon and I got a Knievel.
3 years ago, Braun, a Hollywood stuntman featured in films including Sully and Scary Movie 5, set out to accomplish Knievel's goal of soaring over this quarter-mile gorge. Braun even enlisted the son of Knievel's rocket developer Scott Truax to help him create Evel's Spirit, a replica of the original steam-powered X-2 Skycycle. On Friday afternoon, the conditions were perfect for Braun to take flight. His parachute opened right on time. 42 years later, Braun was finally able to fulfill his biggest dream, finishing Knievel's. Braun used $1.5 million of his own money on this stunt. And DeMarco, it looks like it paid off. After the jump, Braun said he felt like a no-name third-string quarterback on a junior varsity team that just won the Super Bowl.
What a...
All right, thank you guys. Yeah, so I'm starting a GoFundMe to help pay that guy back. Anyway, so who says you can't have fun with geology? The thing where he jumped, again, if you guys have seen Sean Wilsey's, the Snake River Canyon, that actually did cut the gorge, as opposed to the Columbia River. But the Nick Point is at a place called Milner Dam, and that's at Burley, but most of the water funneled down through that gap, and that's pretty much what Evel Knievel jumped over. But that water, only 50% of it went down through the main channel. The rest of it went over the plains, and it all came back together at Twin Falls, and that's where we all went there with GSOC here a few years ago. That's where I met Janet. And then that's where Evel Knievel did his jump. So that's geologic, isn't it? But then these are what's left over of the Bonneville flood, where it rolled these rocks all the way down. Again, the Missoula floods have a mixture of granite and all kinds of basaltic clasts, but pretty much the Snake River Plain is all basalt. So anything that the Bonneville flood moved was mostly these basalt boulders, and they're all around there, especially down just south of Boise, and you can drive through there. In Union Pacific, we used to get gravel from King Hill, and that's all gravel from the flood there. Benches that are cut through there, and I was in a field trip here last year, and we found all kinds of deposits of the Bonneville flood right around where the Grand Ronde River comes into the Snake River. Again, these are all pictures of the flood. So basically, you had the Missoula floods coming upriver there, up the Snake River. This is the Clearwater here, and the Snake River flows north and then makes the bend to the west there. But this is Tammany Bar, and this is basically the next picture I'm going to show you. It has a mixture of the Bonneville floods and the Missoula floods, where they interfinger right in this location. And you can drive over there and take a look at this. It's at a quarry there, but it's you can see it pretty clearly there. You can see it's a lot more finer material with the Missoula floods, a little calmer. And this was the Bonneville floods were definitely more full of aggregate, a lot higher current. I'm going to turn now to the Mediterranean, which is the biggest flood that we've had on the U.S. in terms of a mega flood. And this was not a G-flock. It's not glacial in origin at all, but it's basically, you'll see it's more tectonic. And it has to do with the fact that you have the African plate subducting under the Eurasian plate, and part of that subduction zone goes through where the Straits of Gibraltar are at. And nobody really knows exactly what happened, but there's some evidence that there's tectonic forces at work here. We'll get into that in a second here. But you know, the Mediterranean's been the cradle of civilization for quite a while here. The Roman Empire used it all around there. And this is a shot of Straits of Gibraltar. This is what it happened about. This is basically it closed up over here at Gibraltar about 6 million years ago, and then it opened up at 5.3 million years. So for 700,000 years, it was closed, and it evaporated here. You can see there in Italy where it was blocked off. But that's basically the way the Mediterranean was for about 700,000 years. And you can see where it was opening and shutting for periods of time between that 6 million year mark and the 5.3 million year, and then it finally totally opened at 5.3 million years ago. And this is kind of the where the subduction zone kind of varies through, wanders all through Italy and all that, and you get a lot of volcanism with the subduction zone, and that's is certainly the case with Vesuvius and Etna and Stromboli and Santorini, that sort of thing, all through there. But basically, this is the tectonic footprint of that whole area. It's kind of a mess, and the idea what's going on there, all this stuff is moving, and you know, we had a double earthquake in Turkey a couple of years ago. So all this is extremely all this is moving, and this is a recent article too about the fact that, you know, there's forces that could close the Mediterranean again. That's not going to happen in a lifetime, but you know, maybe your kids can see that. But this is kind of what it looks like when it was closed, and then some of the deposits, because it's a highly saline environment and you had that evaporation, you get these layers of salt down in the bottom, and those are still there. You can go see them anytime you want, but you know, this is all the rhythmic pattern that you see in that salt is all due to this Milankovitch cycles that have to do with the variation of, you got the orbit of the Earth, which is, you're closer to the sun at some places and farther from the sun at other places. Then you also have the precession and the tilt vary minutely. So a Czech scientist a few years ago sat down and calculated all that out, and he came up with these periodicity of about 400,000 years in terms of when you're close to the sun and when you're far from the sun. And so you get this variation that you can see pretty much in all rock types, especially down in the salt beds down in the Mediterranean. But you see it in limestone, and you see it in varves throughout. But you get these different patterns, and those layers are usually formed on about 125,000 year cycle or 400,000 year cycle. But this is kind of what it looked like when it was about ready to break through, and this is an artist's rendition of the flood breaking through. It wasn't a catastrophic flood in terms of breaking, but it was a long, fairly narrow floodway that refilled the Mediterranean. And it happened in just a few thousand years is when it was a lot quicker in terms of filling up the Mediterranean, and it had to refill through Sicily there as well. Just an artist's rendition of these currents going in, and this is what it looks like now. On a side note, that's where all the killer whales are attacking the boats, but we can talk about that later. Another shot of that. We'll switch now to, again, the equivalent of our Wisconsin, or the same ice age that we had that created glacial Lake Missoula. They also had the ice cap there that advanced and receded over there in Europe as well. And this is basically where it was, mostly in the Scandinavian areas. But I put this in there because this is the next part we're going to talk about. It's the Dardanelles and the Bosphorus area. So this when this ice sheet melted, most of that water came through the Caspian Sea and then into the Black Sea. And so that's going to have a big bearing on what we're going to talk about, which is going to be the genesis of the Noah's flood. So stay tuned, and I'll chart that out. So this flood basically started about 13,000 years ago when it melted, pretty much the same time as the end of our Purcell Trench and our Cordilleran ice sheet on this side of the world. But it basically melted, and all that water came down through this area into the Caspian Sea, and then up over a divide through the Black Sea, and then out to sea. Now this basically carved this little notch here at the Bosphorus to some extent. It wasn't a major seaway, but it did cut that through there. It's called, you can see the water goes up and over this Manich River spillway is where it flowed through. But you can see the Bosphorus Straits up in the upper right-hand corner. The Dardanelles was always there, and the Sea of Marmara was. But the new thing that happened 13,000 years ago was the Bosphorus got this little notch cut through here. That's not Noah's flood, but it's basically setting up the phenomena that is going to create the flood here in a few minutes. Here, I'll show you what happened here. So there's the Bosphorus Straits there. Another blow up of it. It's not very long. It's only 20 miles long, and it's pretty deep. So it notched through there, and it's interesting. It's a very important waterway right now for lots of reasons. It's one of the only way Russia gets anything to and from its southern part is through the Bosphorus Straits. It's a very wild and woolly place to navigate, and I found out when I was doing research there. Not only does it have one current, it's got two. It's got basically the surface current, which is mostly fresh water rushing out the top, but it's got this counterflow that's down in the depth of it because it's fairly deep. So you got this, and you get all these strange currents all through there. And as I was doing research for this, I happened across the fact that they just had a big boating accident there, and I looked around, and there's not one, there's not two, there's hundreds of boating accidents. If you get on YouTube and type in Bosphorus Straits, ship accidents, they're all around. There's hundreds of them. So just a demolition derby over there with all these big ships. Anyway, if you guys are looking for something to do on YouTube some night, just go type that in. It'll amaze you. I mean, this took me about 2 minutes to put this together, of all these ship crashes through there. Now, what's important here is you created this little notch, the water was flowing out, and there's a lot of evidence that the Black Sea was fresh through all this fresh water, but you had this, again, the weak zone through the Bosphorus. It was all formed. This is through the Bosphorus area. So it was kind of weak, broken up rock right through there. And then the water flowed through there, through the Bosphorus Straits to the Atlantic Ocean, through the Mediterranean. But you remember when the Ice Age was active, all the water then, and we have the opposite going on now, but all that water got locked up in the ice sheets, in the Arctic. And so it was basically the Atlantic and Pacific was down about 400 feet. So when these glaciers, ice sheet melted, all of a sudden the seawater started coming up. So, basically all that water started coming up 400 feet in a few years. And you can see the timing on this. When I said when Noah's flood was right about that, that time, about 7,700 years ago, that's when the Atlantic filled back up. And so now you have this notch sitting over here in the Bosphorus, and the Atlantic starts coming up, fills the Mediterranean. Suddenly you had the rush of salt water back the other way now. So it was when the Atlantic filled back up is when Noah's flood occurred, and it basically flowed east and created all this salinity in the Black Sea area. at that one time. This is Robert Ballard got in there and figured all this stuff out in the year 2000. But you can see those dates are exactly very consistent with what Noah reported in the Bible. So there's some, at least this is just a guess that the Bosphorus Straits opened up around 7,500 years ago, or 5,500, absolute time. But it was only because the Atlantic refilled after the glacial ice sheets all melted. And this is where Mount Ararat is where Noah's ship, the Ark, is located, or they think it's located. And this is a shot of Mount Ararat from Armenia looking south. And then this is conjectured to be the Ark itself. We'll see. I mean, there's a lot of head scratching going on there, but it's pretty close to where this reverse of, first you had the fresh water carve this notch in the Bosphorus, and then you had the salt water come rushing back in once the Atlantic refilled. That's the Bosphorus Straits. I'm not going to talk. This is from Vic. Another big mega flood was over here at Altai. I'm not going to talk about that, but I am going to talk about what happened up here by the English Channel. And this happened about 10 years ago. Basically, you had the Ice Age melting there. Again, it's that same Milokovic cycles, 400,000 years. And it's basically a mega flood that carved the English Channel back then. And you had the ice sheets. You had this dam, this ridge of the White Cliffs of Dover were right through here. And basically this glacial lake, Doggerland, was basically captured by these White Cliffs at Dover, and then it basically overflowed catastrophically right through that notch. This is just an artist's rendition of what happened. It happened in twice, about 450,000 years ago, and again 180,000 years ago, when you had these advances, and it carved the channel between them. This is all a recent paper that was done by Gupta, and then he basically said in 2017 that this carved all this out, and he had all this research. Again, all this bathymetric stuff was all classified because of the, World War II and all that. The British weren't going to let anybody have any of that data, because that's where they hit all their submarines down through there. So it was classified until recently, and so he was able to get all that data. And that's one of these mega floods that carved that channel. We're now going to switch to Mars. We're going to go outside the world here. And you've got, this is changed, and you've heard Vic talk about what actually put J. Harlan Bretz's theory about scablands and megafloods on the map. It was this, basically we had to go to Mars to get that information. And what Vic said, he got a call one day from the people at NASA, and Vic, as you guys know, was a disciple of Brett's. And so he got this call from NASA, and he said, we've got these photos that we just got back from Mars. And this is where Vic enters the picture there. And so they had these photos that they took, and they just basically said, well, that looks like running water to us. What's it look like to you, Vic? And Vic says, well, come with me. I'll take you to Eastern Washington. So he took a whole bunch of folks, NASA scientists, a whole 25, 30 NASA scientists went out there, and then basically they found this area, and all these scientists basically then sent Brett's a note saying, we now believe you. So they had to go all the way to Mars to get the evidence, so Brett's theory would get vindicated. So this is a shot that was taken in '73. So I ask you, is that Mars or is that the Earth? You guys probably know this answer. Earth, yeah. Is that you, Charles, said that? Hey, you're, all right, I'll give you an A+ for that one. Huh? Well, that's when they went to Mars, yeah. When they got the photograph. I'll show you that photograph in a minute. But this looks like, to the scientists, it looked like this is very similar to what they saw on Mars. And so when they came out to this is basically Bretz's map that he hand drew from the back of his Model T in the back of a train. He did all his investigations by train and by he borrowed Thomas's largest car to drive around. He wrecked it once, and then he had to buy him a new car, but that's another story. But you know, so Brett's found all this. He mapped this out, but again, you know, his fatal flaw is he had the glaciers coming down here, and if that was the case, then he couldn't use Bretz's water. As you guys, any guys watching any of Nick Zetner's stuff, I mean, he talks about this all this time, the idea that this glacial line here was probably 45,000 years ago, or if you go back to the Milokovic cycles, about 125,000 years ago. So there's a lot of talk with Nick Zetner on just these Missoula floods and how Brett's fit into it and why he got confused about where the terminus of that the ice age in at 17,000 years ago, the Cordilleran one. Anyway, but this is again what Mars looked like, and then Vic worked with some of these are scablands that are from Mars and one's from Earth. I don't know which is which. I think this is from Mars and this is from Earth. And so, yeah, like you said, they sent a note to Brett saying we're all catastrophists now. So he was able to be vindicated finally. And these are where all this water was on the surface of Mars about 3 billion years ago. And then that's when the Earth again, this is 3 billion years ago is this is an artist's rendition of what Mars used to look like with all that water. That water's still there. It's down, it's frozen inside the Mars, and you've heard talk about going there and getting that water out of there. But just to summarize all the mega floods, again, the biggest ones in this part of the universe are on Mars, the top two, and then you got Gibraltar and then Dover, and then our glacial Lake Missoula is right up there. But you had all this big flow of water, and again, they're looking at these mega floods, pretty much wherever. You can pick up any journal these days. I picked up one 2 days ago, and it's talking about this huge landslide that happened in Switzerland and wiped out a bunch of villages, so you get these sites put on them. So I'll end with, here's a picture of the Earth and Mars, and what's in common to these two, and the answer is they both have mega floods. So there you have it. I won't close just yet. I'm going to talk a little bit about something that I don't think we should be worried about, but it's something that, again, I'm reading a lot about these mega floods. And here we've got, right upstream, we've got, as you guys all know, we've got, Bonneville Dam. I don't think from a seismic point of view, in terms of a subduction zone quake or even a crustal quake, I don't think we need to worry about the dam failing at all. That's not my concern. My concern is more when you get a big splash, a big landslide that happens to fall into the lake behind there. I think that's something we should be worried about. And the reason I say that is you've got a lot of evidence these days. This is the world's largest tsunami that happened here in 1958. This is up near Glacier Bay, but you had basically movement on this Fairweather Fault. It's one of the more active faults in the world, and it created an earthquake, a 7.2 or something, and this whole wall of right over here collapsed into the fjord there, and there was 3 people in boats that happened when this occurred, and the 3 folks were down in this area. There's 2 boats in here. They'd come out of the Pacific to get into shelter, and there was one over here. And what happened was this wall of water basically broke. See that where it says rock slide area up in the top, and it came rushing down through this Lydia Bay to that area. That 524 meters is basically 1,700 feet high, is how high that tsunami went up and over that ridge. And it happened right at 10 o'clock at night. And you can, because you're up near the Arctic Circle, it's, it's still pretty light at that time of day. So you had the rock slide there, and it fell into this body of water. And this is not a mega flood or such, but the effects are pretty much the same. So the water went shooting down through here, and this is where that one of the boats were located, and then there was another boat here and another boat here. These two boats didn't fare too well. The one boat, nobody ever found the boat again or its occupants. The other boat got flipped over, and the people got rescued out of a tree in there. But the story of that Red Star, I'll tell you about that as we go forward. The Sonny is the name of the ship captain, was basically looking, and he saw this big wave, about 70 foot of wave coming at him, and basically he gunned his boat in the direction of the wave, and he had forgotten that his anchor was still down. That probably saved him, because he gunned his boat in the direction of the wave, and the anchor was holding him until the wave picked him up and it broke the anchor. But by then he had enough propulsion that it shot him up and over the wave. So he survived a 70-foot wave right there, and that's the name of his boat. And basically you'd see where the water sloshed all through there like a big bathtub. And this is Howard and Sonny Urich. They're the ones that they still live, and they still get microphones shoved in their face and all the time talk about their big wave. The fact that they survived is just absolutely amazing. But that's it, and I'll end with that. And this is just another talk. If you guys ever want me to come give a talk about the asteroid, we can do that. Grayson and I were talking about that. It's not Ice Age stuff though, but we can all pass around a glass of ice or something. Yeah, Yvonne, that's it. All right.
Quick announcement of this area, an Ice Age find. I've talked before about a new discovery south of Tualatin, and it's on Conklin Road. Brian Faulkner got started with us in Ice Age floods when he moved a rock from here over to West Lynn area. And I found out about it. I'm the person who relocated relocated the elephant that is in the library. I found it in Portland State in the bones in a display case, and I asked him to change the name from tiger mastodon to Tualatin mastodon, because I had typed the thing 10 years before. So they said, do you know that we don't have room for that thing, and do you want it? All of these bones in the case. Well, I didn't know how I was going to tell my husband about that one. But anyway, they stored it in the Tualatin Public Works under the bench for 10 years after I was gone. And it was identified as Yvonne's skeleton in the closet. So anyway, that's how I got involved in Ice Age. And I learned that Brian Clopton of Clopton Excavating had been hired by had been hired by IAFI to move one of these huge rocks over the West Lynn. And I said, we need them over here, don't give them away. It was from near the golf course. So to make up for my unhappiness, Brian and I have collected all of the rocks that are out here from as far south as Dundee. And recently he called me, he was really excited. He said, I just found a 12,500 ton rock south of Tualatin, and I think it came from Canada in Ice Age floods. So I said, well, I don't know anything about that, but let's call Scott Burns, and he called another professor. I want to give you the address of where you can go see this rock. It's about 3 miles south of here. For anyone who wants to know, it's 11475 Southwest Tonquin Road. So if you go Boonesbury Road to Grahamsbury Road, and then turn right on Tonquin Road, you're very close to it. Brian also convinced the owner to save the rock instead of blowing it up. And then Scott and another scientist, or whatever you call them, came and they analyzed this stone that came in the Ice Age floods and determined it was not from Missoula, Montana. It was from Canada. So it's just something for you to, it's a recent discovery to have people look at. We've convinced the owner of the property to save it. And so he's moved it right out. It's very close to the railroad tracks that goes from Portland to Eugene. So I'm going to give it to you if you want me to. I have to read this little card. I stopped and got a card from the owner of the property, who is Jacked and Company. They do cranes and rigging and hauling, and that's what it took to move this rock from the bottom of the hill to the top of the hill. But it's really worth seeing. Looks like a dirty old rock. 11475 Southwest Tonquin Road, Sherwood. And I'll share that also with you if you would like.
Yes, one.
I just wanted you to know that rather than 12,700 years ago, you can find something in the Ice Age that is today never already been discovered today.
Thanks, Siobhan. Yeah, Charles. Yeah.
I have some questions about your talk, which is fabulous. Does the Mediterranean, because of its nature, have tides, like in the Atlantic?
I think, yeah, they're minor. Yeah.
But they're very minor.
Yeah, there's
Because
tides
the
everywhere.
opening is so narrow.
Pardon?
Because the opening is so.
No, I think it's the moon moving the water. Yeah, yeah. I don't think it has anything to do with the opening. I think tides are ubiquitous. Yeah. Yeah.
So, does anyone else have questions?
We got one on the Zoom here.
Okay.
Yep, so Mike asked, when was the Gibraltar flood?
So again, the tectonic forces that were moving the continent of Africa relative to the continent of Asia, they closed it about 6 million years ago. And it was open and shut for about 600,000 years ago. And then it closed for good between, I think it's 5.6 million years ago and 5.3 million years. So there's 300,000 years where it wasn't open at all, and then it broke open again. And that's all out of a PBS series. You guys can get on and watch that, but it's pretty phenomenal. That's the biggest mega flood that we had. And again, it wasn't glacial related. The question? Okay. Yes, sir.
So I've been hearing a lot lately about mega waves, and I'm wondering if they're related in some ways to.
Yeah, the rogue waves. Rogue waves. Yeah, that's a phenomena that they still haven't figured out. It has, if the waves, if they are certain amplitude, they can amplify themselves, or they can negate each other. It's just the way waves interact. But because they have buoys all through the ocean now, they're now seeing them, and it's not a myth, it's a fact. And but as far as what causes them, nobody really knows, other than just it could be a coincidence how these, if you have a wave here and a wave here and they hit at just the right time, they may double in size. If anybody here in the audience has an idea, you know, Janet? Oh. No, I thought you raised your hand. I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah. Yeah, no, they're seeing, you know, again, the research is you know, pretty much anywhere they're finding these big tsunamis that hit the west or the east side of the whole coast of England that all propagated from landslides in Norway. They're seeing a lot of that. And then there's one glacial lake that I didn't talk about, but glacial Lake Agassiz, which basically it filled the Midwest, and then it finally broke through up by Hudson Bay, and it was a mega flood event there. And then it poured all that fresh water down and out. It actually changed the course of the Gulf Stream for several hundred years. There was so much water it pushed it away, and it caused a lot of changed the climate for about 500 years. That particular flood, that whole amount of fresh water that diverted the Gulf Stream. Yes, Yvonne.
So this rock came, they say it came from Canada. How did it get to the Ice Age floods of this area through Missoula?
Yeah, so let's see if I can go there real quick. You guys all know this stuff here. What do you mean? Yeah, so what Yvonne's talking about, this, you know, all this glacier, all this ice age came down through here and then slammed into this, you know, the ridge here. All this is, they're bringing rocks as they go, Yvonne, and so the rocks are embedded in the ice, and you know, whether it broke off in here and then it was carried down, or here, there's 5 or 6 different places where Canadian rock could get brought down in here. That is, I think that meteorite too is from Canada, and so that's just you know, if you have a landslide that falls onto an ice sheet, or if it picks up a rock from underneath, certainly the meteorite's going to hit on top, and then it's going to get carried down. So all this is just a big conveyor belt. You know, you load that up with ice, and then it just basically moves in whatever direction it can go, but it will carry stuff with it. And then once it picks up a rock, it's got to have a fair amount of ice to support that rock, you know, because, you know, 9/10 of it's just supporting itself. So any if you got a couple 1,000 tons of rock on there, you're going to have a couple or 9 times that in terms of the amount of ice to support that rock. So there would be big glaciers going on. And then,
No, I have a question.
yeah, go ahead, Grace.
So the floods that you talked about in the English Channel, I think you said like 150,000 years ago, 300,000 years ago, something like that. Is there evidence of repeated flooding episodes like there is from the Missoula floods? Like there are people, like you said, 40 Missoula floods.
Yeah, they've got the 2 episodes here. They basically at one at 450,000 years, and then again at 180,000 years, and then it broke through. But again, those are probably related to that Milokovich cycles is what the comparison would be, where you get the you get an ice age because of the fact that the Earth is further away from the sun, and so you get the growth of these ice sheets, and then they turn around and melt, and then that water's all got to go somewhere. That's yeah, I haven't heard. Well, this is all the research I have on this, but I think it broke through here twice, and then once it, I don't know. I should do one on all the glacial there's a lot of glacial evidence and a lot of pretty wild stuff that's going on in Norway too, but that's a little far afield. Yes, sir.
So, back to the scary stuff, so you were talking about the possibility of something flooding into the dam behind Bonneville and that. And we've seen recently, you know, in Asheville, North Carolina, what the water did was sloughed off. So my question is, are there any places along the gorge there that are might be particularly susceptible to that?
Oh, I'd say the whole gorge. You know, in '96 when you guys were here with the flood. Were you here in '96? Yeah, we had a landslide hit a freight train out there, and I was there for 2 weeks picking that freight train up. But that was not. I mean, that one was just a shot from the side. What I'm worried about is just a huge, you know, have an earthquake of some kind and just topple a lot of rock into the you know, the lake behind Bonneville Dam. That would be something I'd worry about. Yeah, I don't know. It'd certainly top the dam. I don't think the dam's going to go down, but it'd certainly be enough water to go over the top of it. Yeah. Yes, sir.
If you could show that aerial photo of the Bonneville Dam, you could show him the landslide that occurred several thousands of years ago from the north.
The one that's there now.
Yeah. This guy right here. This is a landslide. There's a huge cliff out here, and it just went right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is all a complete landslide right here.
Yeah.
And it's possible it might be in the oral history of the Indians.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Well, that's the Bridge of the Gods.
Yeah.
And, you know, so the Indians, Native Americans, again, the water broke through. I mean, the landslide had a lot of rocks on its leading edge. And so there was probably a soil horizon across the top. And so the Indians were able to get back and forth, and the water was able to seep through the rocks for quite a few years. And who knows how long that was. But as Jerry just pointed out, this whole thing was shoved over here. And Jim O'Connor the other day, I was with him, and he says the reason this has this funny pattern with the three dams, as they put those dams in a place where the Missoula flood had scoured out the bottom of the Columbia River, and then the landslide came along, and then basically those places that were scoured were still intact, and so they put the dam in those locations. So that's a benefit of the Missoula floods. It's a little out of sight, out of mind. But you know, I worked for Union Pacific Railroad, and when this slide came up here, you know, it hit the Oregon side and then slid back, and some of these big rock boulders are still out there. And so here's the Union Pacific Main Line when I was chief, and then here they wanted to put in this new navigation lock, and the railroad says, well, wait a second. I mean, what's going to keep this whole thing from sliding into that hole? And the Army Corps of Engineers says, it's not a problem. And so Union Pacific says, well, we don't trust you.
Yeah.
And so they put $1 million worth of tiebacks into this with your money. Thank you, Jan. And so they tied that whole hill back. So the railroad is, you know, probably a little more secure than they might have been otherwise. But that was taxpayer money. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, Scott, that's one of his talking points. He says 10 years. So, you know, we had the Eagle Creek fires 2017. So he says it takes 10 years for the root system to decay to such where it's not going to hold anymore, and that's when you start getting the landslides. Yeah, let's see what else we know in that area. But you know, that is the lobe of the one from Table Mountain, and there's some pretty amazing geology going there. You just type in you know, Bridge of the Gods landslide or the Bonneville landslide, you'll see all the Cascade Volcano Observatory over there. They're doing a lot of research on that.
And in the Washington side, close by.
Well, this is the fish hatchery here in Tanner Creek, and then Eagle Creek, and then Cascade Locks is over there, and then on the on the Washington side is Stevenson, and then that's about all I can see, Yvonne. But
It's north of Bonneville.
yeah, what Jan's talking about, yeah, this is from Bonneville here, and all this material here is all this debris that the Columbia has washed down through here, and that's all basically all from the landslide. And again, Scott Bennett and Jim O'Connor, we went on a field trip here, and they dated that they used to think that landslide happened in the year 1450, and the original estimate was about 700 years. 700 AD was the initial estimate, but then they thought, okay, we had a big Cascade subduction zone that happened in 1350, so they thought that would be it, but that didn't correlate either. So they came up with the fact that they thought they had a carbon date, it was about 1450, and they were going with that, and then just this year, they, because of the LIDAR and the stuff Ian Maiden's been doing, but they were up in a creek that's not too far from Mount Defiance, which is right just on the south side of Cascade Locks. But they found they did some trenching across this LIDAR image of a fault, and they basically carbon dated some wood that was in there. So now the date is 1446. So that's a accurate date that you can tell your wife about, be impressed about. Oh yeah, Jan's got one.
How many dams are upriver from Bonneville? Going on up into Canada?
21.
21. How many of those would have to weigh to have a massive flood come down?
Yeah, I don't see them failing. I really don't. The dam itself, I think you might get. I think they're pretty substantial in there. I mean, you might get a wave up and over them, and that might erode some of it. But if they're concrete dams, I don't see that. Yeah, I don't think too many folks are worried about that. But there's most of them are on the main stem that go way up into Canal Flats up in British Columbia, where the Columbia starts. And then the Snake River's got, the four that keep being talked about, on the Snake River, the lower Snake River Dam. And then they've got some, up by Brownlee and Hell's Canyon, Oxbow. They got 3 up in that area. Yes, sir.
An announcement on TV the other day that there was the very first salmon came back to spawn in the Klamath River.
Let's see.
Where they had just taken down some dams.
Yeah.
The fish swam 283 miles upstream to get to that point.
Yeah. Well, as you know, the Snake River goes, and then the Salmon River flows into the Snake, and then the Salmon River goes all the way up into Redfish Lake up by Stanley. And Redfish Lake is named for all the salmon. But when I moved here in 1974, that's when the dams closed. So I told the people in Idaho that they got to change the name of the Salmon River because they don't run there anymore. They don't think that's such a good idea. Thank you guys for coming. Yeah. Thank you, folks online.
Well, we have a tradition here, which I have been trying to invent it for. And did a lot of looking, thanks to New Season Market. And we now have a company called Oregon Growers, which had been up in Wood River, and now it's down in Tiger. And so I have a jar for you. It's not strawberry yet. I bet you have quite a bit of strawberry because we speak there so much. But how about peach?
Oh, yeah,
And the nice thing is that this is a fruit spread, so it's made with fruit from the Willamette Valley. And
right.
it is lower in sugar than jam is. So but it's whole fruit, it's not made with concentrate. I thought you might like that.
Well, thank you. You're just a peach of a guy.
I know. Pleasure, Mark. And also, if you run our red raspberry, I brought some of that with me too.
Oh, yeah, no, this is fine. Thank you, Charles.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
guys for coming.
Yeah, totally.
You guys got my email. Jan's got my email. He can always ask questions anytime.
Edith and Lynn. Edith says, thank you, very interesting. And then Lynn online says, thank you.
Oh, yeah. I should look at the chats, huh?